This is what happens when your next door neighbor works for the local candy factory. However, it has nothing to do with a concert featuring Flogging Molly and Social Distortion, and which also happens to have a couple of rather unpleasant surprises. How's that for a tease? You're gonna watch the video now, aren't you? Now that I've got my hook into you. So going to punk shows used to pretty much be my very favorite thing in the world to do. I was somebody who didn't really fit in with my peers, and being at a punk show surrounded by these other fellow outcasts gave me sort of a community of like-minded people who, if nothing else, at least shared an enjoyment for the same type of music. It was also an opportunity to spend a couple of hours in a mosh pit, just enjoying the freedom of unbridled violence in a controlled environment where paradoxically those who were participating with you were also looking out for you and taking care of each other. Possibly most importantly, it was a release valve for the immense amount of inner violence that all the trauma of my life has stored up, and it was an opportunity for me just to let a little bit of that out every couple weeks or so. It's been a long time since I've been to a concert though. I've gotten old, tired, and the biggest hindrance of all now is the fact that I just can't handle being around people. And that's sort of proven by the fact that I think my last show was the one where I had to smack a guy a couple of times who was being extremely irritating. And I'll link that video at the end of this one. But part of me mourns the loss of that activity and the emotional outlet it provided. It was also a space where I could sort of let loose with myself in a way that I couldn't in any other aspect of my life. And I miss it a lot, especially since so many of those bands from the 80s and 90s, those punk bands that survived and are still alive, are still somehow touring and still somehow just putting on these amazing shows. But one of my brothers, the very talented individual who painted this painting, bought me a ticket for my birthday, and it was for a show that was headlined by Social Distortion and had some opening bands including Flogging Molly, The Devil Makes 3, and one or two others. So the other night he and I drove into Toronto to catch this show at Echo Beach. Now the story of the night was going to be whether it got stormed out or not, because Echo Beach is an outdoor venue right on the waterfront on an actual beach location, which I've said in the past makes a rather awkward spot for a punk show. I don't know if you've ever tried moshing in shorts covered in sand and having your shins sandpapered for a couple of hours, but it is an outdoor venue, and they were forecasting a thunderstorm to be rolling in at 10 o'clock p.m. According to the concert timetable, all the other bands would have played by then, but Social Distortion, as the headlining band, was due to hit the stage at 9:55 p.m. Again, with that storm scheduled to arrive at 10 p.m. So we were sort of watching the skies and keeping our fingers crossed while we enjoyed the show. Now my brother wanted to get there in time to catch The Devil Makes 3 because it's a band that he's been familiar with for quite a number of years now and enjoys their music. They're sort of a bluegrass punk type of thing, and we managed to catch only the very last song that they did. By the time we got downtown Toronto, got parking, got to the venue and all of that stuff, they were just finishing up their second last song. So unfortunately we missed most of their set, which is too bad because they did really sound like a fun band.
Won't you bury me in my high top steps in hell? Put a $20 gold piece on my watch chain so the gang don't know I died sitting mad. I want 6 crap shooters for Paul Bill. Pretty gal, sing me a song. I want a jazz band on my husband wagon to raise hell as we roll on.
After they had played their final song and gotten off stage, my brother and I were sort of walking around the outdoor site there, just having a look at things. And as I'm walking with him, I hear a couple of voices say, "Josh? That's Josh, right?" And then at the same time, I hear 2 guys say, "Josh, Josh." And I turn around, and I don't know if you've ever had the experience of looking at somebody and not just seeing a face that you recognize but not remembering who they are, but actually looking at them and going, I don't remember ever seeing this person before. Now multiply that by 2 for these 2 guys that were standing there looking at me, and there were a few seconds where I must have had a completely blank look on my face because one of the guys said both of their names, and then at that moment something clicked and I recognized their faces, and they were Toronto paramedics who were there. I guess they had come together to watch this show. Now, with me being a Toronto paramedic who has been on disability for nearly 7 years now, I'm deeply ashamed of the fact that I have been off of work so long, and I really try to avoid interacting with other paramedics as a result. So when it hit me that these were 2 of my former co-workers, something in my PTSD brain got triggered there, and I kind of went into this fight or flight or freeze mode. Now, my fight, flight, or freeze reaction is almost 100% of the time fight. But in this instance, because of the shame I immediately felt at running into a couple of my coworkers, I went 100% flight in that instance. And after making small talk for a minute or so, I basically just had to get out of there and keep walking. And I found a little area to sit down with my brother while we sort of waited for Flogging Molly to come on stage. That gave me a little bit of time for the tumbling in my brain to settle down and for me to sort of think about what had just happened, and to think a little bit more about those 2 guys in particular. And they happened to be 2 of the co-workers that I had really enjoyed working with. They were guys who weren't your typical sort of really strong type A, put on a uniform and start power tripping types. Rather, they were really genuinely nice guys and very kind of chill people to work with in that emergency setting. And as a result, once that initial panic subsided, what really took over was this kind of heartbreaking sorrow over the fact that I couldn't be out there on the road working alongside these guys and sort of being out there in the trenches with them, and then maybe being able to come to this concert with them after work and enjoy socializing in off work hours with people who are really good people. And it sort of gave me a deep sense of loneliness for kind of where I ended up at this point. So yeah, it's kind of a lot of emotion coming from just running into a couple of former co-workers, and I'm sure it's a little bit crazy and all that, but it was just a weird experience to have happen. And I think it is the first time in the time I've been on disability that I have run into former coworkers. So what I wanted to do after my brain had settled and I was feeling that sense of loss and loneliness was to go run and find them again and just spill the beans and tell them everything and say, just take care of yourselves, don't end up where I've ended up, and send help for God's sake. I don't know what's happening to me. But I mean, yeah, we just sort of hung out there until Flogging Molly hit the stage, and then we got back to the fun again. So Flogging Molly, I've seen them a number of times. They're always a lot of fun, always high energy. Although they felt maybe a little more subdued than usual. I don't know if they had focused on a number of their slower songs. They played a bunch of their older stuff, and I didn't get into the pit to mix it up with the kids. I just stood back and watched like an old man with all the rest of the old people who were there to see Social Distortion. Of course, the whole time we were sort of watching the skies, watching this cloud bank rolling in from over the city. And sure enough, towards the end of Flogging Molly's set, we could see these flashes of lightning off in the distance over the cityscape as we were standing there on the shoreline on this beach watching the concert. Before one of their final songs, the lead singer of Flogging Molly even made a comment like, "Oh, I better shut up because there's a storm rolling in, so we got to keep it moving."
Social Distortion!
And they did get through their set. They got off the stage and we went to sit down to sort of await the start of Social Distortion set. And then, sure enough, the voice comes over the PA and says, due to a storm that's coming in, Social Distortion will not be playing. Please make your way to the exits. And Social Distortion had to sort of drop out from their show. Obviously that was disappointing. I mean, I have seen them in concert 2 or 3 times, including I feel like not that long ago in Toronto, at least a couple years ago I suppose, at a different indoor venue. But I was really looking forward to seeing them again and to poking fun at all the kids who tried to mosh to Social Distortion songs. But oh well, it wasn't to be. We enjoyed our time watching Flogging Molly, and we just sort of got in the car and headed home from there. Obviously Mike Ness isn't a young man anymore. Hopefully he's still got some good time left in him, and maybe there'll be another opportunity to see them again in the future. But all in all, it was a great chance to hang out with a really great person in the form of my brother, and to catch a bit of fun live music. And now here's where you can help me out. I'm always on the lookout for great music, so let me know who you've been listening to. Have you discovered any great bands that have really excited you lately? I just love music. Of course, I tend to lean more heavily towards the punk side of things, but there is a wide variety of music that I enjoy, especially when it comes to live music. There's just something about the live music experience that's really quite special and magical. But if you're a punk fan and you're aware of some punk bands, I've been looking for a newer punk band that might excite me as much as those bands from the 90s did and still do, but I don't know. I can't seem to find any fairly recent, younger punk bands that really get me pumped up. So, in any case, let me know what to check out.
I've been walking past forever to these footprints of my road. When I offered you my songs, you took me with the night. Keep my heart when you are hungry. I have nothing more to do. Let us not forget each other when I wake up in time.
So say a prayer for me in silence. No cathedral, my heart hurts. That's when I will be forgiven. Let us never fall apart. Let us never fall apart.
Hey, it's Josh. Thank you so much for watching. If you wouldn't mind just crushing that like button, smashing that subscribe button, and chucking the link for this video with someone who you think would enjoy it, by golly, I would appreciate that. Cheers. According to the schedule, according to the concert timetable, all the other bands will have, according to the concert timetable, and then I don't know if you've ever, now I'll duplicate that, now multiply that by 2 for the 2, something in either case. I would head downtown Toronto, catch some late